Hello, friends. Today, I want to talk about one of the most hidden and, at the same time, destructive psychological mechanisms, moral sadism. This phenomenon can be considered the most powerful and dangerous psychological weapon of people with mental illnesses, especially those who are the so-called first generation, that is, the origin or initiator of mental illness in their family or community. What is moral sadism? It is a behavior in which a person, relying on moral or religious justifications, judges, punishes, or hurts others and, from this process, gains a feeling of psychological pleasure and a sense of dominance over others. In this type of sadism, the main difference from sexual or physical sadism is that it is hidden and intangible. Moral sadistic behaviors are covered in the mask of benevolence, honesty, or defending principles. And for this reason, they are much more difficult to detect. People with this mechanism usually present themselves as guardians of moral values and principles and try to be recognized as such by others. This role-playing gives them a large mask and a haven to implement their destructive thoughts and behaviors without being held accountable or punished. These people usually create a lot of psychological power for themselves through constant judgment, humiliation, and punishment of others. They benefit from both making themselves look good and destroying others. It is interesting to know that many of these people themselves have grown up in environments that are full of judgment, rigid and inflexible principles, and punitive environments. Environments where the need for control, pent-up anger, and repressed complexes did not have a chance to emerge. And eventually they hid behind the mask of morality. It is very difficult to distinguish moral sadism from a healthy conscience. A healthy conscience is based on helping, caring, and building, while moral sadism is completely destructive and, at its peak, leads to the psychological destruction of the victim. People who use this mechanism, the first generation, do this quite consciously. In this case, the sick person not only has no empathy for the other party but also enjoys humiliating and crushing him. In fact, on the one hand, he exalts himself and on the other hand, he lowers the other party to the level of a worthless human being. These behaviors are most evident in families where the first generation of mentally ill parents apply it to the children of the second generation. Its effects are also very intense and destructive. But in the following generations themselves, they also exist in a mild and unconscious form. This phenomenon is also seen in workplaces, such as a manager who, instead of guiding and supporting employees, humiliates and blames them and makes them appear incapable under the pretext of duty. Or in marital relationships where one spouse controls the other with moral justifications. We are also witnessing a worrying growth of these behaviors in cyberspace. Victims of moral sadism usually suffer from intense guilt, anxiety, depression, deep distrust of others, and loss of identity and self-esteem. Especially if this behavior is from parents or primary caregivers, the person develops complete distrust of society, and a kind of secrecy and hypocrisy is formed in his personality. Unfortunately, there is not much that can be done against the first generation who consciously use this mechanism except to stay away and keep their distance. But when faced with the second or third generation, who are unknowingly involved in this behavior, awareness-raising methods can be used. For example, the person should ask himself, was this person's behavior really to help me? Or did he intend to destroy me? The most important thing is to know that moral sadism harms the sadist himself, in the long run, more than it harms the victim. Because it turns the greatest human capital, morality, into a tool for suppression and, day by day, distances oneself from human nature and positive energies. Sometimes this distance becomes so deep that returning to the path of humanity becomes difficult or even impossible. My goal in raising this issue is to increase public awareness of mental illnesses and their consequences. My goal in launching this channel, namely effective psychotherapy, is to provide practical and real information and training to the public so that we can all build a healthier and more humane society. Thank you for sticking with me until the end of this video. I wish you all good health and peace of mind. Goodbye.